And welcome back, guys. Today was round number 6 of the European Team Chess Championship. Austria played against Belgium, and today I was on the bench, so I had the pleasure to watch the match against Belgium. The match was super exciting, you might say, and it was looking pretty badly for our team for most of the time. So I was actually not sure that I was going to cover the match, but I decided to do so after all. And I don't want to spoiler how the match went just yet, but just walk you through the games one by one. So as you can see here, this was the pairing of board 1, Dardha against Alekseenko. But I thought it would be nice to go through the games by which finished at first, to give you a feeling on how the match was progressing overall. So the first game that finished was the game between Dominic Horvath and Maerevoet. Hopefully that was pronounced somewhat correctly, which Dominic has lost with the white pieces fairly quickly. Let me briefly walk you through that game. Dominic played e4. It was Rossolimo Sicilian with e6. Dominic decided to take on c6, which is one of the main lines next to the move short castle, b takes c6, and now b3. This is next to d3, one of the most critical tries here. White just aims to develop the bishop to b2 immediately. Knight e7, black was obviously pretty well prepared, bishop b2, d6, and now white has to go for e5, otherwise black plays e5 himself and gets a pretty comfortable position. After e5, black went knight f5. Black's problem is if d5 comes, then white could go for c4 at some moment and then fix the weakness on c5, which generally is not a great structure for black. So knight f5, d3 and f6. So in this position, black has the trump of having the bishop pair, but on the other side, white has the healthier pawn structure, which especially comes obvious after white takes on d6 and goes for this type of pawn structure. Black goes c5 first, probably doesn't really matter when he takes, since the pawn on d6 is anyway lost. And then we got this position. And here Dominic went for short castle, which he told me after the game that he should probably aim for a plan with queenside castling, like knight e2, and then slowly maybe try to prepare short castle with queen e2 and long castle. But also there is going to be knight d4. So, I mean, black's position is pretty healthy here too, even though he does have the worst pawn structure. So Dominic went for short castle, now f4, which the computer says is the best move, but it surprised me quite a bit. Simply because white's plan, as I understand it, should be to keep the position more or less closed and to really play against the weakness on c5 by going, for example, knight d2, knight e4, then bishop a3, and f4 generally is probably an important idea, but I would have found it a bit more natural to start with knight d2. But still, white's position was very much okay, but so was black's. He put the knight to d4. Knight d2, f5, rook f1, and here both players played pretty well. Position was just around balanced until this moment. Knight e6, protecting the pawn on c5, and now both players should probably just slowly try to strengthen the position. Maybe knight f3 would be one pretty logical move, which I would maybe play in a blitz game now. But Dominic, computer says bishop c1 is the best move for some reason, and then gives this line as the best. But knight f3, I don't really see the problem with the move in this exact position. But Dominic went for d4, opening up the position, and surely he had some concrete idea behind it. Well, the pawn on d4 is hanging, which black should have taken immediately, but his idea was to go for knight d6, which is understandable. Also here, objectively speaking, black should end up on top, but I don't want to go into too much depth here. Black decided to take on c4 first, giving away the bishop pair, which was not the most precise move. Again, c takes d4 first would have been better. Knight takes c4, c takes d4, now queen takes f5. Dominic was quite upset at this moment that he didn't go for knight to d6, and after rook e1, it does feel like white might have a small initiative, or actually not a small one, because rook e8 is quite an unpleasant threat. Also cd4 followed by queen c4. Queen takes f5 is there as well. I think black had to play queen a5 here not to run into some trouble. But instead Dominic took on f5, now queen d5, and here they went to this endgame. They took on f5, knight takes f5 was the only way to keep the balance, and Dominic had to find this idea with knight h6, gh6 and rook f6, and white is barely holding on. This is the line which the computer gives, and in the end white should hold this this rook endgame without any difficulty. But rook takes f5 was played, rook e1 check, rook f1, rook e3, and now Dominic committed the final blunder, which is rook c1. Again, knight f5 with this quite difficult idea, knight h6 check was the only way to keep the balance, and here white keeps some drawing chances once again. But after rook c1, the game is over. D takes c3 now, and black's passed pawn is just too dangerous. King f2, rook d3, knight e4, bishop d4 check, and the rest of the game was yeah, not that exciting anymore. Rook takes e1 came, and Dominic resigned because bishop e3 would come here. So this was the first game. Belgium was leading 1-0 for them, which already was not a great sign for the team. Now let's go to Alekseenko's game, who was also under quite some pressure in the opening. It was from a Catalan with knight d2. He took on c4 and a3, bishop takes d2, bishop takes d2. I think they were both sort of following the theory here. Dardha played knight h4, which I have not seen this before, but it must have been some preparation. Rook a7 was played by Kirill. I guess that the computer prefers to go c6 since there is a small change in evaluation here. Rook a7, of course, trying to keep the diagonal open so that black could play bishop b7 next, trying to exchange this often passive bishop on c8. But he's not fully in time for that. a4 came, and after bishop b7, a takes b5 is possible. And black's position was pretty solid here. Black is even a pawn up at the moment, but black's pawns are quite weak overall. Especially the pawn on c4 should drop pretty quickly. Funny thing was that in the game, actually, the pawn never got lost. But with precise play, white should have been able to regain the pawn on c4. However, it was not so simple, and Kirill actually fought really well and posed problems to white. It continued rook b7, bishop c3, rook b6, knight e3, rook c6, quite imaginative play to protect the pawn on c4. Now queen c2 was played, short castle, rook a5, harassing the queen on b5. Queen b3, and then they went into this endgame. When now Dardha played d5, when I think somewhere around here things started to go wrong for him a little bit. I had in mind the move f3. I think this was not even the computer's top choice. I think rook a3 was the best. But I liked f3 just to avoid knight e4, and it seemed to me like black is under quite some pressure. Rook a1 is coming next, then maybe rook a3. King f2, it just seems like white's position plays itself pretty nicely at this point. But Dardha played d5, and now there came some simplifications, and it looked like the game was heading towards a draw, but black is a pawn up for the very moment. And Kirill pretty nicely outplayed Dardha in this endgame, just keeping the pawn advantage, and at some moment he was able to convert the extra pawn, which was quite nice for the overall situation. This is how the game went. And it's also important to note here that in those positions, white can never take on a6, because then rook takes e3, b takes e3, and b2 would win the game. White cannot stop black from promoting. So the game then later on, black even gave back the pawn, but now those advanced pawns are just too strong, and here white resigned because there's no way to keep the black's pawns from advancing or losing the pawn on b2 if black can capture on c3. So with this game, Alekseenko managed to level the score, but that still left the game of Markus Raga and also Valentin Dragnev, which we'll get to next. I think he was the last one to finish. Markus had the white pieces against a FIDE master, and he, as usual nowadays, opened with e4, and we got a Spanish opening, a Ruy Lopez, with bishop e7, and now bishop takes c6, which is quite a novel approach in this line. Typically white goes for rook e1 or d3, rook e1 being the main move by far. And with bishop takes e6, white just aims to get this type of Berlin position, and soon we actually transpose to one of the lines in the classical Berlin. Just that the pawn is still on a7 there. Let me show you how that comes in the Berlin with knight f6, d3, bishop c5, bishop takes e6, d takes e6. White often goes short castle or knight d2, and then black often retreats the bishop to d6. Therefore, we see some quite similar positions there. So in the game, this is the position we got. Bishop c6, dc6, now d3. And here black played bishop d6, knight d7 is another possibility. And here quite quickly. Now after a5 we finally transpose to the Berlin, because there is exactly the same position from the Berlin, just that the pawn is still on a7, but now after a5 we are back to a more theoretical position, which I actually played myself from the black side against Benjamin Glederer at the previous Olympiad in Budapest with a black side, where he completely crushed me in that game. And you can also find that video on my YouTube channel where I went into the details there, and he really played a fantastic game there to beat me. I had the black pieces there, just to clarify. Queen e1, this was played, also Benjamin played it against me, and now Marco's opponent went b6. Instead, a4 was my game against Glederer, knight a5. This is the whole idea of White's kind of strange-looking move, queen e1. And as it often happens in the Berlin, if the knight gets to a5, it becomes a little bit difficult to keep these pawns together, because b6 is never possible, because c6 is hanging, and therefore black would need to play c5 and then b6 at some moment to try and get the knight out. Queen b8 here is the important move, and there's still some theory. I think against Glederer I played queen c8 here, which is not the most precise move in this position. After b6, now queen c3 was played. I'll just briefly go through the opening now, just to mention d4 would have been the right move here, with the point that ed4 is not possible since e5 is winning a piece. Then the position after queen c3 and knight d7 became pretty complicated. Marcus took the pawn on c6, which is quite risky though. I think that still d4 would have been the best move in this position. The queen is a bit risky here on c6. It's running into some danger to get trapped. And Marcus was immediately trying to get it out by going d4. And let's jump a few moves ahead. Here black has fantastic compensation because of the bishop pair, and it already looked like the game would be quite one-sided, at least from in a positive way for them. Bishop e6 was played. I think that was all pretty natural here. Just after bishop d4, king h1, here the computer does not want to take on b2. This was quite a big mistake. Instead, bishop takes b3, and going for a position like this would have been the best for black when he keeps very nice compensation. After some twists and turns here, Marcus even had an advantage here if he would have gone for f5. We reached this type of position. f5 was quite a nice strategical move, using the chance to blockade everything here. And slowly it really started to go wrong for Marcus here, because black has by far the better opposite color bishop. Now pawn on a4 was dropping, and here he was really lost. He tried everything he could with rook d7, trying to get some counterplay here on the 7th rank. Now e6 could be in the picture and g7 could be weak. So black played a nice move. He went c5. Rook 3 to d6. Now black took on d7, rook d7 and rook e6. Very logical, stopping white from going e6. Queen c4, queen a6, queen takes c5, and now let me tell you a funny story. At this point, Dominic was already finished, and he came to my room just to watch the remainder of the match, and we were quite pessimistic at this point, because it was not 100% sure that Alekseenko and Dragnev would win, and here Marcus' position is just completely lost. He's an exchange down. Queen f1 at the very moment would probably just end the game pretty quickly, because after king h2, queen takes f4 check, king g1, white can black can just play something like rook e8 and solidify the position. There's not going to be any mate on g7, and black is just a clear exchange up, and even a pawn on b4. But even without that one, black should be quite easily winning. And then at this moment, I suggested some logical moves while analyzing this. I think rook c8 was one of them, which we talked about, just attacking the queen, but then queen takes b4 came, and it's not entirely simple for black to convert, because now also f4 is protected. And at some moment, I suggested the move queen to c6, which was in fact played in the game as well. Looks quite logical, because you're attacking the queen and the rook on d7, and of course, an exchange of queens would mean that the game ends on the spot, because white will not have any counterplay, and black would play b3 followed by rook c2, just queening the pawn or winning the remaining bishop. But queen c6 has one problem, which is that white can go queen a7, and here black actually resigned, because there's just no way to stop both queen takes b8 and rook takes g7 from happening, which must have been a really cold shower for the Belgian player, but of course a super important victory for us that we're able to win this match. We have been a little bit unlucky in some of the other matches. Well, I'm not sure even if it's unlucky. Some of the games, also including from my side, just weren't weren't that great, but in this match the luck was definitely on our side. But of course also Marcus was trying his best to ask his opponent still some questions and to post some tricks, which in that game fortunately worked for us. And here, as I said, Black had to resign. So at that point the match was already then won, I believe. I'm not sure in which exact order the remaining 3 guys won. But when we saw this, me and Dominic in the room, we were just jumping out of excitement because we just couldn't believe our own eyes that Marcus was able to win this game. Now let's get to the last game, which was played by Valentin Dragnev with the black pieces. And that was actually a very decent game by Valentin, who just outplayed his opponent and won a very nice game. Let me just briefly walk you through it. It was a Najdorf with Valentin on the black side, Najdorf with g3, now e6. And we got this quite typical kind of Scheveningen position. And white went for the plan with queen d2 followed by b3, bishop b2, which is probably not so critical, but it leads to a playable position. But Valentin just slowly outplayed his opponent here, just played quite logical moves. And here we can also see the downside of white going a4. And I really like this moment that he played a5 in this position, just making sure that the pawn on b3 is going to be a major weakness. And Valentin really played the game quite nicely. Bishop c3, attacking the pawn on a5, now rook a8. And also nice was that he slowly tried to regroup the knight from f6 to the very attractive c5 square. And he did that by going bishop e6, putting the knight via d7 now to c5, f6 just protecting the center, and also giving the bishop a square to move back to in case f5 happens. Queen c2, knight c5, knight c1, and now he decided to release the tension in the center. Computer doesn't like that move so much as some other choices, but he immediately followed it up with the central strike d5, which definitely made it difficult for his opponent from a practical point of view. And his opponent immediately went wrong. After taking, he went rook d1. Apparently f5 is the way to go, and then a move like knight d2 and putting the knight to f4, when the position is extremely complicated with chances for both sides. But rook d1 happened, now knight e4, and you can already see that white's king is actually quite weak. Let's jump a few moves ahead. Things were heating up at this point. Valentin was already winning, and I think somewhere here there was his first chance to really end the game on the spot after rook b6. He could have gone for bishop c5 with the point that white cannot take since the rook on d1 is hanging. And if rook e6, now bishop takes e3, and white is doomed because of the pin on the d file and also because of his weak king, and there are many threats with knight f2 still. But he played queen e5, which is still pretty good. But now at this moment, white would still have had the chance to go knight b2. When he told us at the dinner he was not entirely sure about this position, which is also not objectively so clear. Black is still doing pretty well. But the moves are not so simple. Black would need to go for something slow like h5 and then king h7. And white also might have some counterplay with it, like pushing the a-pawn. But luckily for Valentin, white played rook b5, and now he played the move bishop c5, queen to e2, queen e6, and after knight takes c5, now he just ended the game on the spot with knight g3, and a few moves later, white resigned because... Actually, it appeared checkmate on the board. I didn't even realize. I thought he resigned at an earlier moment already, but that's a nice way to end the game as well. So that was it about the Austria versus Belgium match. It was a really bumpy ride, and yeah, my nerves are at the end after watching this match. I cannot imagine how our team captain Borki Predojevic must feel after enduring this. They're sitting next to the games and watching all of it. Must have been a real emotional roller coaster. But I'm still super happy that we were able to win the match. Now at least we got 2 match victories in a row, and it looks like we are at least sort of fighting back to the higher boards. Maybe we even have a stronger opponent than us in the next round. Next round is actually not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow, since we have the rest day coming up, which is surprisingly after round 6. Typically not in tournaments, often it's after round 5, but here it's after round 6. Anyway, for tomorrow, I have got planned an opening idea video about the most interesting opening ideas from this tournament so far. I sat down today and was just going through some of the games and looking for some interesting ideas, and I've already found quite a few of them. So that's the plan for tomorrow, since I want you guys to still have something to watch, even though there's going to be a rest day. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's analysis. Super interesting match, and Belgium put up an extremely good fight. We have to say that. I mean, we could have easily lost a match. Like, Dardha didn't have to lose that game, most definitely. Also, the last board, Markus Raga did not have a winning position by any means. And yeah, but sometimes you gotta have to be a little bit lucky, and today was our day for that. So thank you guys for watching, and I'm gonna see you guys tomorrow.